Hi, welcome to this introduction to seq-emperor. In order to use seq-emperor, we can just drag it from a Finder or Explorer window, or we can just drag it from the Ableton browser. So we just drag it in. Let's first rename it, so it's going to be more obvious what is happening. Okay. And now let's make some sounds. But obviously, since seq-emperor is a MIDI device, it doesn't produce any sound by itself. So we have to use a virtual instrument in order to receive the MIDI data and then produce sound. So I will use a Rowley instrument equator, and we can just drag it after seq-emperor. So now nothing is happening because seq-emperor is synced to the host, so to Ableton, so we have to turn on the transport in order to make it work. And as you can hear, we are producing sound. But there is one problem by doing this, let's say, serial connection, so first seq-emperor and then equator. And the problem is that we cannot record the MIDI data on the track. So if we try to record the MIDI data now, as you can see, there is no MIDI recording here, so this is a problem. So a better way to do that is to delete, now we will delete here the equator track, and we'll put it on its own MIDI track. And we will delete the empty MIDI. But of course, now it won't still work because if you press play, nothing is happening because there is no routing. Even if you press record, nothing is going to happen because the routing is not set. So we have to set that seq-emperor will send MIDI data to equator. In order to do that, we just simply navigate to this MIDI 2 and we select equator 2, which is this second track. And now, if we press again play, we hear the sound. And also we can record the MIDI now. So as you can see, the notes are appearing now. So this is, I think, the best way to set up seq-emperor and a virtual instrument. Okay, let's now delete this MIDI clip and add another MIDI track and add to this track the MPV visualizer, which will help us see what is happening inside of seq-emperor. By the way, this is available free on the Max for Life site. I will share a link below. So in order to make this work, we could the same try to send to this track, but as you can see, there is only one option to send to here. So we can only send to this track and not to this one. So we have to take another routing options that Live offers. And this is that we can receive MIDI from, as you can see here. And here we have our MIDI keyboards, but down below we have the seq-emperor input. And again, if we enable it and press play, we can now see the notes. Now let's open the visualizer so that we can see it on top of everything. And move finally to seq-emperor. So we have now done all the routing, so now we can start to use seq-emperor. Let's now quickly go through the interface of seq-emperor. It somehow reminds us of Ableton because we can sequence in horizontal view, as we will see later, but we can also sequence in vertical view. So the horizontal view is, let's say, a monophonic step sequencer, but on the other hand, in the vertical view, we have a 8-voice polyphonic sequencer, which is also MPE, as we will see later. And a lot of things relate to 8 options. So we have 8 voices, as you can see here. And then we have 8 modules to control. So the first one is the pitch, as we can see here. And then we go to the next one here with, this is the velocity, pitch bend, which is again polyphonic, so it's MPE. Aftertouch, or on some MPE controller is called press. So again, this is an MPE option. Control change or slide, again on some MPE controllers. And then we have the timing, the note values, the duration, and the chance of happening or probability. So if we now go back to the to the pitch, we see that we have these 8 voices, which we can interact with. But additionally, we have an additional slider, so here, which is a group slider, so it controls all the voices together. So if we now move to velocity, we put it a little down, and we have, so we see that we are controlling all the voices together. Additionally, we have down below some controls for each model. So in the pitch model, we have the quantized settings, the root and the scale, which can be changed. We have the octaves and the random bottom. As we will see all of this in detail later. Again, moving on, on the velocity, we have the velocity range and the speed. And on the top of each slider, we have a gesture feature, which is, I think, quite interesting. So we can turn it on, and let's say now we are controlling the velocity, we can now automate our movement. So as soon as we press with our mouse, the gesture start to recording. And so now I will press. When I press, you see the slider becomes red and it's recording. And when I release, it will start to play my gesture. So now we are controlling different velocities. Additionally, if we turn on the gesture sign, we can transform it to a recorder. So this is another way to record. And let's now move to each model independently. And let's start make some sounds. So as we saw before, in order to make seq-emperor work, we need to turn on the transport, so the play in live. And we are getting the notes. So now, as we can see, it looks like there is just one note playing, but this is actually because the notes are on a line. But we can change that just by moving on this area, and we can just drag. And you can see that we are getting more notes. And you can hear that they are repeating because the note repeat is turned on. But we can turn it off for each voice. Or as we learned, here is the group section. So when we can move up and down. And so on the group section, we can also turn the note repeat off for all the voices. So the notes will stop because there is no note repeat present now. Now we have different options. How can we produce sound? So one we have already seen, so it's with the note repeat. So we can have separate notes repeating. Another one is, let's say, this horizontal one with the step sequencer. So we turn it on here. And so we are now controlling in step. We can change the direction. We can make it random. We can change the note values to something else. And we can set the range. So now just the first 3 voices are controlled. As we saw on the horizontal, we can have the step sequencing, but on the vertical lines, we have the polyphonic sequencing. And we simply introduce it by just dragging a slider around, or more sliders. Additionally, we can also use the gesture feature. And so the slider is going to make its movement automatically. And we can set the whole range. And we can temporarily offset them. And as soon as we release, it will go back to the previous position. But we can set it to permanent, and so it will stay in the position of the offset. Okay, so we have now introduced the gestures on our pitch model. And as you were hearing, the pitches were quantized, and we can turn the quantization off here, or for the whole group again here. What you were also hearing is that each voice was playing in quarter notes, and this is because this is set on the time model. So as you can see, or are in quarter notes, but we can set different notes values for each voice. So we can set like from quarter note to 132. So if we listen now to the sequence, the last voice is moving much faster because it's in 132 and 116 and so on. So now you can understand that this movement of voices is defined by the note values that we have set in the time model. So if we go now down, let's say to one whole bar, as you will see, the first voice, it will take quite a lot to move positions. So it will take one bar to move to a new position. But if I set it to, let's say, 16 notes, it will go much faster. So you get the idea there. So it depends on what time values you have set, and this is how fast the notes will change positions. And again, this can be changed in real time. So let's use for clarity just one voice, but we can do it on all voices. So we can again automate these time values with a gesture. So we can have like really fast ones, slow ones, and so on. And so now if we go back to the first voice and also in here enable our gesture, so we'll have fast and slow notes depending on the gesture on the timing model. And obviously we can combine that, so we can turn and we can make some sequences like that. The cool thing is that when you learn to control one model, basically you can quite easily work on all models and you will get the basic idea. So let's move now to some other models. To get a better idea of what is happening, it's useful that you enable just maybe two voices and then move on. It's like in music, you start with a simple idea and then you evolve it. So let's now just turn the mute on for 1 and 2. We are at 100%. If we turn it down, less events will happen. Let's return it to 100% and move to the timing. As we can see, the time model is moving. Let's make it static. And now, as we can hear, also the pitch are moving. So let's turn on. Now they are playing because velocity is still triggering the notes. If we turn them all, it will stop to play. So again, with velocity, we can turn them on. And they are still based on our time. So we have 16 notes and 8 notes. Let's just now turn them down so that we can hear the next model, which is the duration model. And let's re-enable the note repeat. So the notes will repeat automatically. So they will repeat at half bar. And let's now move to the duration. And now we are at 100%, so they will exactly match half bar. But we can make them shorter. And now they are shorter. So with the duration we define the length of the note and can be shorter than the original note value, which is half bar now, or can be even longer. So now it's 100%, but we can set the range to 200. So they are gonna be longer now. And again, with the gesture, we can make some movement in here. And this will apply even when we change the note length. So now the quarter note is going to be longer and the eighth note. And now we can limit the range with our duration range. So now we're going to be shorter. Okay, let's now stop these two voices and return to the time module and see what's happening there. So let's re-enable this to 1. So as you can hear, these two voices are now running, one in quarter notes and the other in eighth notes. And as we saw before, we can change that with the gesture. Additionally, we can add some swing to these voices. But what is even more interesting is that we can change the values. As we saw for now, all the values were just in these basic notes, so quarter notes, 8 notes, 16 notes, till 32, and so on. But we can change that for all notes in here. So we have different options. We have the basic ones plus the triplet, and the basic one plus the dotted, and the divisions, free, and so on. So we will take a look at each one on these modules. So let's now change the first one, so it will have also the triplets. So we have now also the triplets now on the first note. And on the second one, let's also add the option that we have triplets and dotted. So we can have dotted. Obviously we can still apply the swing and get some quite interesting rhythm structures. But we can additionally, if we now return to the quarter note here, we can also have divisions or repetitions in a bar. This is used obviously for polyrhythm. So the cool thing is that now if we move also this one to quarter notes, when you switch to divisions, it will automatically apply this. So we will have 4 divisions in a bar. So basically now it's playing the same. It's like having quarter notes. But when we divide this to a different division, you can get the polyrhythm effect. So if we divide this to 5, let's turn out the offbeat. So we can have different divisions, 6, 7, and we can go to some crazy one like 15 and so on. Again, we can get some really interesting results by combining this with the gesture. Again, the swing still applies, so we can get really some complex textures in there. So I think you get the idea there. Another option is that we can also set it to free, so this will be in milliseconds. And as you will hear, this is again will transform the current divisions to milliseconds. So at 120, this is 500 milliseconds. So again, they are now playing sync, as you can hear. But the cool thing is that we can just a little bit offset the second one, and they will start to shift out of timing, which can get them some really interesting rhythms again. As you can hear, they are shifting. Maybe if we also record that, that could be interesting to see. So as you can see, they are shifting, but they were eventually aligned over time. Again, you can build some really complex textures. And obviously, when you combine this with multiple rhythms, you can get some really interesting results, because each voice can have its own rhythm. So you can build these really complex rhythms out of it. And again, this can be just like a little texture that we can put really quiet. And it emerges only sometimes over time. So we can have this offset rhythm just appearing from time to time, which I think creates an interesting effect. And obviously we are just using free voice, but we can move on and add like, again, like polyrhythm and so on. You get the idea. So you can build some really complex structures, rhythmic structures with this. And again, here in milliseconds, you can go really like low or really long, up to 2 seconds. And again, with the gesture, can be quite interesting. So there's a lot to explore in the time model. Okay, let's now just reset the timing to some basic values like quarter notes, so everything is gonna be more obvious. So the next thing that I would like to present is the pitch spread, which I think it's really interesting. So we return to the pitch model, and down here we have the spread option, which will spread the notes when they are close together. So this can form a really interesting effect, or basically just creates some chords when the notes are close together. So we can set again for the whole group here the spread. So we set it to 3. And now, when I move with the first voice, you will see the other voice move when they are close together for a third. So let's try that. So just with one slider, I'm controlling 3 additional sliders which are forming some nice chords for me. Again, this can be really interesting with the gesture option, because we automate just one slider, but he's actually creating a lot of chords for us. And again, the spread option has its own controls for each voice. So now they are all set to 3, but we can make like a 5. So we can move to further steps. So not just the third, but the 5th, and like, why not the 7? And here the up to 11, of course, or an octave above. So you can see that now this note is moving an octave from this note. So we are creating these interesting chords. And this is just with one gesture. Obviously, we can introduce more and so on. So I think this spread option is really interesting and can create some nice chords. Okay, let's now move to the MPE part of the sequencer. We have already seen the velocity part, when we can find different velocities. But the third one is the pitch bend. So let's just introduce the pitch bend and let's add a note repeat. So this is the first voice. And now we can pitch it up or down. And again, we are now just pitch it with a range of 200, but we can obviously change that and make a more drastic change. Let's for now just return to 200. And obviously, since this is a polyphonic sequencer and an MPE sequencer, we can pitch each voice individually. So if we now introduce the second voice, let's make it just a little bit up, so it's going to be more obvious. Let's turn down the spread now. So we can turn the first voice down and the second one up. And let's make the third one wiggle a bit with the gesture feature again. So we are controlling each voice independently, the pitch bend of each voice independently. Okay, let's now reset the pitch voices to its center position and move to another MPE parameter, which is aftertouch. So now all the aftertouch is set down, but let's introduce some aftertouch to the first voice. And the second one. So now each voice, it gets in its own aftertouch. Again, this can be quite nice with the gesture feature. So each voice can have its own gesture. Also, the group slider can work quite well in here to create a riser-like effect. So now we are going up, and as soon as we release it, it will return to the previous position because it's in temporary. So I think you get the idea there. Okay, let's now move to the next MPE model, which is control change or slide. So when we move up, we get a different result. But as we can hear, it's not moving in the best way. So we have to take care of where the slide starts to happen. And we can do this inside equator. So if we go to the global, we can set the preset slide mode is set to relative, but we want it to be absolute when we are using in seq-emperor. The relative is more useful with the MPE keyboard. So let's try now. And we can hear that it's working well. Okay, let's now see one more interesting part of seq-emperor, and this is the random option. So let's turn all the voices on now. And let's go back to the pitch model and turn on the random option. And as you can hear, now the voices are playing in random. And we can change the range of the random, so we can go lower, we can go higher. We can again use the range to offset all of that. But one thing that is also really interesting is that we can exclude some voices from the random. So let's say the second voice. And so now we can move with this second voice out of the random, so we can go higher. Let's try also this one. And again, we can combine this with the gesture. So we can now separately move the random part, so they can come close together. And just throw it down. And what is even more interesting, that we can even combine both, so we can use the gesture and the random together. So if we now turn on back the random, you will see that the gesture will still play, and we will get, and it will jump between the random state and the gesture state. And if we decrease the speed of the gesture, we will get more voices in the random part. So it's another fun way to create variation. Again, we can increase the speed of the random or decrease the speed of the random, so now it will be more in the gesture part. So we can get some really interesting results by doing so. And again, we can now offset all of this, so we can move the gesture, the random part and the static part together. Or we can say, let's say that this gesture won't go with the group, so it will stay there. And again, we can do all crazy stuff with that. So we can turn off this voice, this note repeat for these voices, turn the random off, so we have just the first 3 voices, turn on the sequencer just for these 3 voices, go down in the random, play with the spread. So this sums it up, and hope you learned something. And obviously, when you combine all of these modules, you can get some really interesting results. Today we have been just focusing on exploring all of them in a separate manner, but when you combine all of this together with the horizontal sequencer, with each model, with the chance option, duration and so on, you can get some really interesting results. Thanks for your time, for listening, and stay tuned for more example videos coming soon.